We are presenting reason amongst cultures, specifically, well, you'll see what we are specifically going to talk about. And it's by Ivan, Alessio, Crystal, and Judith. Okay, we will be discussing lapidation in the Middle East, which is stoned to death. As you can see obviously in the pictures, a person is buried underground until only with up to the shoulders.
Or waist if it's a man.
Waist if it's a man, up to the shoulders if it's a woman. And after a signal, the people around surrounding the person throw rocks until she or he dies.
And the rocks can be too small, because then you have to hurt the person, but they can neither be too big because they can kill immediately the person. It's to suffer.
It's really a slow and painful death, and that causes a lot of suffering in the victim.
Okay, this is our real life situation. And in 2004, a 13-year-old girl, Sida Diar, was sentenced to death by stoning in Iran for the crime of being raped by her older brother. Although the sentence was later returned due to international outcry, equally, horrific stoning sentences are quietly carried out throughout the developing world on a regular basis. So, even though the sentence was later this poor girl was about to be killed by him for being raped instead of really committing a crime because she didn't do anything. And this is the kind of situation in Iran.
Well, not only in Iran, in many Middle East countries like Afghanistan and Ecuador. Our knowledge issue is, to what extent is reason merely objective and universal, or does it show a discrepancy among different cultures? And you will see now how that's related to our life situation.
Knowledge complex theory. The first conflict we're going to face is reason is not always objective. When talking about reason, we cannot think of an objective or universal way of reasoning. Reason can be based on personal experience and on an individual's ethics. Ethics are involved in reasoning because it may be defined as the questioning of the truthfulness and validity in the moral principles, and usually deals with the way each individual absorbs the morals of a society. Consequently, one may describe ethics as the reason why we do what we do and we think what we think. For example, if it's in one ethics believes to refuse drugs, it would be logical that he or she will refuse drugs if by any chance someone should offer them. Therefore, due to ethical beliefs, one is able to reason that drugs are harmful and so will not use them. In fact, experience plays one of the most important roles in knowledge. In fact, thanks to experience, we are able to learn new practical knowledge which can stem from written education as well as forming an own opinion of the world. Our experience determines the way we reason because it sets our mind for expectations. Another example of experience is a biker who accidentally falls off his bike because he is running too fast. And experience can teach him that next time he is going to go slower because if he goes too fast, he's going to fall. This provides that experience is able to change our way of reasoning. And another example is considering cultures. For example, in our environment in Marymount, we have different cultures. And so a close contact with this multicultural society changes our experience with them and hence the way we reason about their personality or identity. Therefore, both ethical beliefs and experience shape our mind and our ability to reason out.
Okay, the second conflict in knowledge is perception of situation that varies according to different cultures. The way each individual perceives and interacts with its environment may change from culture to culture. In fact, there are certain cultures which may aim to eliminate superficiality while perfecting detailed and accurate analysis of our life. This is due to the fact that how people use in a different way their brains to solve some visual perceptual tasks. MIT, one of the most famous university in America for technology and research, furnished an explanation for this. Psychological research, moreover, has established that American culture, which values the individual, emphasizes the interdependence of objects from their essentials, while East Asian societies emphasize the collective and contextual interdependence of the objects. Behavioral studies have shown that these cultural differences can influence memory and even perception. Okay, to study more about this problem, a man named John Gabrieli asked 10 East Asian recently arrived in the United States and 10 Americans to make quick perceptual judgments while in a functional magnetic resonance image. These scientific volunteers were asked a series of questions. Were shown a sequence of impetuses consisting of lines within squares, and were then asked to compare each stimulus with the previous one. In some trials, they judged whether the lines were the same length regardless of the surrounding squares, an absolute judgment of individual objects independent of context. In other trials, instead, they decided whether the lines were in the same proportion to the squares, regardless of the entire size. A relative judgment of interdependent objects. Okay, in his results, Gabriele noticed that Americans were more accurate in absolute judgments, and East Asians on relative judgments. This time, in previous studies, this time the scientists noticed that there really isn't any difference between how the two cultures perceive the stimuli, but they noticed that the brain activity was different. In fact, Americans, when making relative judgment, activated brain regions involved attention-demanding mental tasks, while East Asians had the opposite tendency. They engaged the brain's attention system more than absolute judgment than for relative judgments. So the problem here is how do these differences come about? And Gabriele quotes that everyone uses the same attention machinery for more difficult cognitive tasks, but they are trained to use it in different ways, and it's the culture that does the training. He also says that it's fascinating that the way in which the brain responds to this simple jawing reflex in a predictable way, how the individual thinks about independent or interdependent social relationships.
And that's a summary of what we said. Okay.
Reason amongst cultures, this is an overall skeleton definition. Real-life situation is a real-life situation which we said before. Then how we can implement our knowledge issue, and then the context that this knowledge issue stirs. One of these is ethics are involved in reason, and perceptual situation depends on culture. So how does ethics shape a person? First of all, ethics help us to distinguish between right and wrong. It helps us making the right decision, and which could either be good or bad. It just depends on our actions. So, ethics are involved in reason. A real-life situation is facing two cultures, the Europeans versus the Middle East. Europeans state that stoning to death is wrong, according to the supporting claims that a person suffers tremendously and slowly leaves this world, and it is also seen as cruel and brutal. well as it takes away the person's dignity. The European way of punishing is a death penalty, which does not involve physical pain. For certain parts of the Middle East, stoning to death is a legal act belonging to the Sharia law. And this law is sacred, is a sacred law of Islam. And Muslims believe that the Sharia is derived from two primary sources of Islamic law: the divine revelations set forth in the Quran and the example set by the Islamic prophet Muhammad in the Sunnah. So therefore, to them, it's sacred, it's legal, and we don't see anything wrong with it. And the Sharia deals with many topics addressed by the secular law, including crime, politics, and economics, so forth. And some versions require that married or divorced persons found guilty of adultery be executed by stoning, which is often in women's case. Overall, there have been more women's cases being stoned to death than men, which also the Europeans perceive as something unreal because it is a sexist view. Countries which are predominantly Muslim or which have a large minority of Muslims vary greatly in their treatment of people found guilty of this crime. And therefore, this is how two worlds clash, having two different opinions, two different ways of perceiving reality. And that's the conflict that's stirred.
Another real life situation that we took in consideration was was the simplest one. Like when reasoning something as simple as why eat and drink. The cultures in our world seem to have one clear answer and logical opinion: survival. Eat and drink is needed to survive. And this is one common reason the people of the world share together, like they're not discriminated. History shows us that people wanted to be able to eat to survive. However, reasoning can be different concerning moral beliefs, which do vary when considering different cultures. For example, in the Aboriginal culture of Australia, young boys are taught to survive in nature at a very young age, immature age. And this process is called walkabout. The chances of your boy returning home are scarce. And if a boy does return home from walkabout after living in the wild for 6 months, he has become an official adult. Okay. The journey the boys undergo is a natural tradition required in the Aboriginal culture. So it's part of their belief. The instinct of a boy is challenged throughout these 6 months, but reasoning whether to go or not is not questioned in this culture, since it has been done for as long as their culture has existed. When comparing this kind of reasoning with German or European culture, it is the total opposite. In our culture, there would be a great deal of reasoning whether or not to send a boy to that age to go walk about. It would be out of question to send an immature, underdeveloped child out into the wilderness. Our culture's more beliefs and instincts would never allow a child to go off into the wilderness like that. We have authority that would restrain against such a thing. It is not in our mind and soul to send our boys out like this. We have different ways of expressing a male's adulthood, like joining the army but this varies from culture to culture. Again, here you can see that reason varies from each culture and tradition, depending on authority and historical events that have shaped our moral beliefs and logical opinions. So this was an example of another real life.
So, our evaluation, since each culture lives in a different environment with different needs,
different skills and different lifestyles, they have a different view of the world. Therefore, they have different ideas, beliefs, and desires that are affected by their reasoning.